Okay, our world of illusion. Okay, um, I'm going to start as usual. It's a world of illusion in the sense that we don't really know what the world really is. None of us know completely, okay? And that includes myself. But I think that human beings, number one, are spiritual beings, and everything around us is really spiritual. Even low, it appears to be solid and physical. And this is because, number two, human thought creates reality, solid matter, what we see, what we hear, what we touch, smell, etc., the five senses, shall we say. And number three, should I say, sorry, we are all connected. They're the three main points that I always make. One, we're spiritual beings in a physical body. Two, our thought creates the physical reality. And three, we are all connected. Okay, so the first one is we're spiritual beings and everything around us is also spiritual in a funny kind of way. It's hard to explain, but it is really all spiritual in the sense that the world that we know around us is really controlled by us because we create reality with our thinking, and two, because the world is also controlled by other spiritual beings, not us, not human beings, other beings. They're different to us, right? You can think of this religiously if you want to, or any way you like, but or if you want to think that they're from another domain. But essentially, they operate spiritually with us in the sense that they control us and direct us and uh, have dominion over our earth. And they're spiritual only in the sense, I think, that they know how spiritual we are and they know our thoughts, our very being, everything about us, because they have been here, because they have been with us all along. And they use what they know to direct us to create our sense of what the reality is, in the sense that we're creating it, but we don't know we're creating it, and also we are influenced by their surroundings, what they put around us. A bit like if you watch a movie, you're influenced by it. A bit like if you watch the TV, you're influenced by it. A bit like any information you get, you're influenced by it. A bit like you're influenced by the people around you, by the environment around you. But all this is created by that being, or the being and those that work with the being. Okay? The master, the God-like presence. I'm reluctant to say these words because, like everyone's perception of a God might be different, and whether you would accept this as your true God or as a God for you is up to you. I'm saying that this world is not ours and we do not really control it. Now, when I also said, okay, if you see something on the TV that is a way of influencing you, and so therefore what you create is influenced by what is around you and what you see and what you think, and that is all influenced. In other words, the more we take in from our surroundings, the less likely we are purely creating. In fact, we are creating, what's the word? Vicariously, is it? In other words, we're creating through another entity, really. We're not creating purely. We're not creating totally originally. And even if we have, and although we are the creators and have the original thoughts, we don't actually know how they're being used fully for the full creation, because we're not doing it all on our own and directly. But anyway, I'll just get to, without getting too complicated, because it is a bit, even for me. If you do watch the TV and you watch a movie and things like this, I would like to say that this is much more real in many ways than what you actually see around you, because there is a lot more truth of the whole picture given to you. It's given to you, but we don't see it that way because that's right, our perception of things is usually limited to what we see and hear around us and to what we believe to be the true reality. Whereas if we see something sometimes on the TV, we might say, well, that's true because it's on the TV, but we may interpret that as being fantasy. What I'm trying to say is that because we live in a duality world that is largely illusion and false, and has the duality always operating, the love, hate, the right, wrong, and also the duality even in terms of information, I think. So, and it is a reverse world, as I've said before. So that means that everything that I think I should probably reverse, because that will be much more likely to be the true picture. And it's the same, yes, and so it's the same when I see, you're likely to get more truth off your movies and stuff like this, where that is showing you the reality of what is outside of your realm, outside of what we see. It's always more far-fetched. It's always like a fantasy. And it shows you most of the time how things really operate, but they don't operate for us in our actual reality that we see, because we are very much like what we have been programmed from birth to believe and to see, and so we think that is the real world, and we haven't developed our minds to think past that, because we haven't been allowed to, because that's all we know. That's what we believe. That's our belief program, you could say. I say a belief program because it's what we believe to be true, but it's really what's been programmed into us. This is what I now realize even about myself and my life, and it is a little bit disturbing, to say the least, because it really means that it's a bit like you've had implants put into you that tell you what everything is. but, and because, you still have a choice to believe everything you're told. But if you take it to be fact, a true history and stuff, there's no reason you would doubt it, you see. And even the choice aspect, where some people might say, well, if you're silly enough to believe something that's a lie, that's your own fault. You've got a choice. But, that's true to an extent, but you'd have to be a pretty advanced person to be able to do that correctly all the time, to be quite honest. Now, it's like this. The only way I think that we could really advance enough, or at least think enough. Sorry about that. See, my train of thought gets taken away by the negative things around, because, like I've said before, it's a spiritual domain, really. But because it's a spiritual domain controlled by negative as well as positive entities, the duality, the entities that control the world operate in duality. Duality is both good and bad. Duality is always a choice. I myself say that human beings are not meant to operate that way. This is the creation of the world, of the duality entity God, and the program. So I'm trying to get my head around it myself. I think that if a baby was born and they had no education, and they just interacted with other, and as they grow, instead of going to school, they interact with other children, but they don't go to school. They don't get the program, shall we say. They don't get all the information, all the so-called knowledge and stuff. Now, this is, not everyone's going to agree with this. I would think that they would be much more, as time went on, they would become much more open to the so-called fantasy realm. In other words, to the real realm, because the fantasy, the false things that we think are false, because we live in a duality world and a reverse world, then you have to be able to see that everything is in reverse, that everything is wrong. Essentially, everything is wrong, if you want to look at it another way. That's what I would say. I would say everything is wrong. Nothing is right in this world. Everything is in reverse. Everything is upside down. Good is bad. Bad is good. Right is wrong. Wrong is right. Even though we would not accept that or agree to that or acknowledge it even. That's because we don't actually now realize how far we have gone from the correct course. And also, the deception is so great that when we think we see the right, and we are seeing the right, we're still really operating in the wrong, because it is a fantasy world. It's a world of illusion. It's like a master magician has taken over this world, and he has. And he knows so much more than we do, and knows so much more about us even. So the upper hand, as you can imagine, is very great. This is like some people perceive of God, where God knows your every thought and knows your everything about you and knows everything about the world. So you can imagine that an entity who has this much power and this much knowledge and this much information, true information though, can then play the fantasy game with humans to where they don't know very much, but also they have the choice, but they have not, because they have also had the program, so much false stuff put in, which becomes then your belief, because what you see around you and what you are told about the world and what you are told about what is happening all the time, it becomes then a belief that you believe that it is the reality, okay? And then you turn your TV on and you watch some far out thing on the television and you say, that is the fantasy. That is not reality. That might be the reality in the future. It might have been the reality in the past, but it is not the reality now. What I'm saying and what I think is that that is the true reality. Whatever you think isn't real is probably much more likely to be the true reality. It's shown to you. And that's another thing that I think is that everything has to be shown to humans. Because we really are the creators, and because we really are spiritual beings, it's almost as though we have to be shown the truth. Otherwise it breaks a law almost, you could say. Now this I'm not going to go into too much because it's not something that I can prove in a video. And you would need to go into alternate histories and fish it out for yourself. You will need to find out what is the true history of your world. I'm saying there are two histories. In fact, you could say there are three histories, really, in a way, that just come to me now. Because if you look at it, there's what some people would call a reality based on the history, the historical knowledge that we have in books and stuff that we would believe to be true. In other words, we would believe that certain explorers, for instance, discovered certain countries in certain years. Stuff like that. We would believe that we are a planet, you know, so far from a sun in a solar system with other planets that we know of around us. This sort of stuff. This is what we have been told and learnt in school, right? That sort of stuff. That's one history. That's what most people consider to be a factual, real history. Secondly, we would have what I would call a biblical history, like the Bible, where that is a history. It may or may not correlate with the first history, the historical history that we take to be a real factual history. And then there is a third history of like you know, like you would talk about, like we would accept that, say, ancient Egypt existed, right? And that ancient Greece existed, right? Things like this, even though I'm not an expert on any of these histories or subjects, I'll tell you that now. So excuse me if I upset anyone, if I get a little thing wrong, especially details and things, okay? But what I'm saying is that in those two kind of periods, ancient Egypt and ancient Greece, they had different gods to what we have now. Like they might have had like like in ancient Greece, and I'm there again, it's been a long time since I have been to school and a long time since I've looked at any of this sort of stuff. You would have, they used to worship different types of gods, like, oh, you probably know some of the names, the Zeus, the Apollo, all these different types of gods. I can't think of them all offhand now, but you would probably know. And the same in ancient Egypt, they had their Osiris, and of course even the pharaohs themselves were half regarded as almost divine and god. But what I'm saying is that that is also a different history, a different a third history in a way, because in those periods of time they believed that those gods were real, and they were figures, they looked like men, and they represented gods of water and air and different things like this, and they believe that. And that is like another third history. It seems more fantastic. But even in the Bible, you have the Old Testament history, which also appears to be quite fantastic in comparison with what we perceive to be real, you see. So, what I'm trying to say is that these fantastic things are other histories, but we have kind of eliminated them from possibility in recent years. But if everything is false and everything is in reverse, there is no reason to discount these things. They're not operating now. And because they're so far back and we don't have a videotape of them or a picture of them, although we do have statues and we know this we do have remnants of all these things. This is what I'm saying. So actually we kind of do, but not a great deal. And that depends on how a lot of people want to interpret them. Like, I suppose a lot of people would just say, well, those were false gods, they were not real. The people then must have been backwards, so they invented all these names and all these gods and made statues of imaginary things. So but how far do you take that? Because even if you go back a very short period of time, a lot of what we believe to even be our true history is still only based on little bits of written record, maybe little bits of this and that. It's not that to where you really have a total genuine video of everything at all, and yet we take that to be fact. So it's only in recent times really that we would even, that we even have the invention of the film and all that sort of stuff. See, so what I'm trying to say is, because time passes, and if a civilization is wiped out or dies off for whatever reasons, then the new generations that come up will have to start again. So what was held to be a fact or true then is dismissed and left by the wayside, because the new people won't have seen that. They will have started fresh. And they may even be ignorant in a way, because if some of those previous civilizations were a bit more advanced, because they would have probably had to have been, then I have to start developing like a baby again. And so I'm not going to know of all that. And even if I find remnants and stuff, I'm just going to make of it what I will. And I probably won't believe it, and probably won't even get the full picture. You see what I'm trying to say, I think, maybe? So, so what was once fact and real becomes legend, fantasy, and no longer fact eventually. It becomes fantasy. It becomes like, not believed anymore. And the Bible in some ways, the Old Testament, you could take that the same way, even though I know a lot of religious people would believe it all. But I'm not, there again, I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that I think it's not real. I'm just saying that other people, because of the fact that there is not enough proof and because so much time has passed, and it seems fantastic, like if people can do things that they can't do now, and if things were different to what they are now, people just can't believe that. They don't. And it's the same if they see, and this is what I'm trying to say. I'm not saying it very well, I'm sorry, but I'm not good at this. But if you like, it's the same when you watch a movie that is too far-fetched for you. You don't believe it. You say it's interesting, it's fascinating, but it's not the real world now. It's not going on now. And I think what I'm trying to say, and I may be wrong, is that it's all the same thing. What's happened in the past was real, and what you think is going to happen in the future, or what you see as a future possibility or a fantasy of the future, or anything that does not fit what you are living now in our mundane lives, it's all one in the same, and it is all connected, and it has always existed. It's always been a fantasy. It's a fantasy now, it was a fantasy then, and it is a fantasy in the future. But there is no difference. It's all going on. What you see on the TV as fantasy is real now. It's not a fantasy. And it's shown to you. The truth, it's the truth because it is real. But it is shown to you. And you have to be able to see that as real and the truth. If you don't, then you dismiss it and it becomes fantasy, and therefore you are going to live that way and accept that your reality is not in those possibilities. Whereas that's what I was trying to say at the start, is that this is the same thing. If a baby is born and a child grows up, but it is educated a certain way, and we're all educated the same way, and we're given the same information, we're programmed. It's a program, because anything that goes into your mind is a program. But if it's not the past and the present and the future program like the reality is, in other words, if it's not telling you those three histories, the three histories, and combining them all, you're probably not getting a true history even. And that doesn't happen because we are not given that. We're programmed with a very small history. And also we're programmed with a history that shows things a certain way, a certain slant on the history too, because that's only natural, because however something goes down, like if you live in a certain country and a certain country has taken over another country, or discovered another country even, naturally that is always going to come from that country's perception, and their records are going to favour their way of doing it. They're not going to give another view on that invasion or that discovery. Whether you want to say, if you go into another country, you discover something, is that, yeah, and you take it over and you inhabit it. Like I live in Australia, and certain explorers came and discovered Australia and then took it over for themselves. Now, from our perspective, we discovered it and we developed it and made it better. from another, that's our perspective. It doesn't mean that it's the truth, because it was never ours to take. And just because you discover something, does that mean it's going to be yours? Like, you might discover lots of things, but it doesn't make it yours. It doesn't mean you have the right to own it. But that's how the world has operated. But what I'm trying to say is that I think I've rambled too much. I'm so sorry. I'm losing my train of thought. But so just take what you can out of what I say, because it won't be very coherent. I'm trying to make it, but I'm not very successful at doing that, because I'm probably trying to put too much in, and without facts and pictures and a lot of knowledge, you have to investigate things for yourself. This is what I would say. Look into all the different histories. Look into the Bible. Look into the alternate histories. Look into the old gods, the old histories. Look into even what the real history, but see how it all works, if it all doesn't fit, if some of it doesn't correlate, because I think it actually all does. So what I'm trying to say is, nothing is really that false. It's just that we assume some things are correct and other things are false. I'm saying we should perhaps take more of what we think of as false and fantasy and say that is a reality. That's why it was put there for us. It's showing us the truth, the real reality. But it's usually put there in such a way that, because of the thing that we don't rule this earth ourselves, and that it is influenced and dominated and operated by a different entity, a duality God entity that likes to play the game, like this earth is his game, I'm trying to think of a word. It's a game to him, and we're like the players, but it's like a game, a video game, a board. The game is like, the earth is their game board, almost, you could say. Is that putting it right? I'm trying to think of the right words, but it is essentially where they can see everything that's going on, and they can direct and control different aspects of it, manipulate different aspects. It's like making the game more interesting, making the game more to what serves their needs. And so this is why, but because we are spiritual beings, and we do create reality with our thinking, because it's our domain too. And it's like, it's our domain, but we don't actually have we're like, we don't ever have an upper hand in any way. And this is because we have made the choices to allow this system, kind of this, it's a bit like, okay, I was just saying, the rat race, like, this is what, some people say, we're in the rat race. Well, the rat race society is the construct of the being, okay? But we accept that, and we play in it, and we work in it, and we create in it. And our thought creates reality, and we're all connected, but we don't know that. We connect via artificial means. This is the construct of the game, artificial means, but we're not really meant to connect that way. We can connect naturally, but we've lost that knowledge and that ability to do it very successfully. And because we are in a chaotic game system, shall we say, we can't think clearly enough to even perceive what is going on or how to even create successfully, you know. Um, and like I'll just go back to it, but I'm going on too long. But like if a baby is born, I didn't get very far, do I? A baby is born and then he grows up, but he doesn't grow up. He's like, say, still a child, but he's going to school, and so he's learning the one history, not the other two, no other alternate histories or anything that has happened thousands and thousands of years ago. Or if he does learn that, because we do learn that a bit too, but we're not told that those gods were real. Okay, we're told we're just told we have the statues and things, but that's what they worship because man just naturally wants to worship a god. And there's a bit of truth to that too. Man does tend to naturally want to worship a god. And that is probably because, I think, this is just me, that because we are spiritual beings and physical our thought creates physical reality, and we're all connected, but we don't really know these things and we can't operate that way. So we feel not complete. And so we are looking for guidance and stuff from something else. And this is because we're separated, because we're really all connected, but we're not operating that way. So we have the need then to find the God that will give us the direction and that comfort. And that it's like a subconscious yearning almost, I think. I'm putting it that way, and yet I'm probably way off track. But you know what I'm saying? Now, this isn't to say that there isn't this God entity that rules the thing at all. No, I'm saying that is another thing. But I'm saying that's why we have that need to worship and to look always for something more, because we're disconnected and we don't know where we are. We are really quite lost in a way, and we are very much so. And even when we find the truth, like myself, we're still lost because you're still dealing with this real world that we are creating, but we don't know it, and it's still tangible, it's still in front of us, and it's still annoying us, influencing us, infiltrating our thinking and coming into our mind all the time, you see, because it's there and it's intrusive. And the same with the God entity knowing all your thoughts and knowing, more about you than what you know, and certainly more about your history and about what is the real world or the real reality, shall we say. Um, you're at it's very confusing, and we're at a great disadvantage, and even those that know are still in a great disadvantage, because unless we are all connected and know it and are operating together, and that is no indication that we are not individual points just the same. Like, I'm still an individual, but I'm meant to be combining that or sharing it, or being aware of just the reality that your thoughts are not just your thoughts. That instead, the God entity is using that, and he knows the thoughts, but the human to another human does not know that the thoughts are transferred, does not know that their thoughts and their thinking are creating reality, and that they're sending that thought to another human being with the feeling. I think the feeling with it is the thing that creates the reality, I think. And also, as I've said before, the fact that the subconscious is also doing this, and we do not even have a conscious access to the subconscious. We only are even aware of our conscious mind, and even that is controlled very much by what's around us. So, but anyway, getting back to what I was trying to say, uh, so sorry that these videos are not very explaining everything very well. If the baby and the child, as a child, is got the education put into it with that only that one history, that is all they know, and that becomes their belief and their way of looking at the world. And it's limited because it's only one history, is what I'm saying. But my actual thinking is that the child would be better off with no thinking at all that way. In other words, no information. I think that a child, if it almost is given no information, almost little education, you could say. Now, a lot of people would not agree with this. They will have their own mind, and they will be much more open to the fantasy realm, which I'm saying is the real realm. So what I'm saying is that if you are open to the fantasy, to the where your mind doesn't dismiss something that isn't right in front of you and isn't limited by what you've been told and what you believe, what you are programmed by belief, then you will, at the very least, your mind will be open to the fantasy, to the possibilities of everything that way, to the possibilities that, just because that isn't in front of me, that is still real and it can be going on. But you might not just be outside of your door, but it could be going on somewhere else in the world, in some other place that you don't see. Because, we only operate according to what seems to be around us, and the rest of it is what is programmed to us by the information that we get, whether it be off the TV or, or whatever. And that becomes what we think is the real world. But I'm thinking that this world is a world of illusion. It's a duality world ruled by an entity that plays with reality. We create the reality, but he is playing with us. So we are not creating we don't even know what we're creating most of the time. So we probably could be creating a lot of negative stuff. And as our thinking also is influenced by feelings and by what emotions we have. So if you're going to watch negative stuff all the time and see negative stuff, you are going to be sending out negative thinking. And negative thinking and negative feelings will create a negative reality. And if everyone else is also doing that because they're under the same program, they're probably watching similar things, they're in the similar reality that they think is the reality. This is why we've got a very chaotic, negative type of world, because we are not aware of anything we are doing or what is even going on, and we have no real knowledge of the true kind of possibilities of other worlds, of other things. This is and because we are very much in that belief system where we've got the program going from when we're quite young, we're not open to any other possibilities. We're not open to anything else becomes what we call fantasy, false. And that is only because we're limited, our kind of way of looking at things. And our minds close down that way. I know mine has, and it does. Even though I might now believe or think that there are these other history, other reality, shall we say, operating at the same time as ours. By that I mean that just the fact that I'm saying that we do not really run this world, that automatically implies that there is another world or another reality, at least one that we don't see, you see. So, and you don't see God. You know, if there was a God, we all know that you don't see him, you don't see any of this sort of stuff. Now, I'm saying that I think that the Bible and the alternate history is just as much to be believed as the history that we are programmed and told. But you need to see it in a more realistic light, not see it as a fantasy, but also you need to put it into a real concept almost. In other words, if you look at some things in the Bible and some things in the alternate history, shall we say, you have to say that the God may not necessarily be God as we perceive the God to be. You know, it could be a entity that is just a lot more advanced than what we are at the present time. And even that is only like what I would quite frankly call technologically advanced. Not more advanced, but only tech. This is because I've said before, we're spiritual beings in a physical body. Our thought creates reality. We are all connected. You have to accept those basics before you start if you're gonna follow my kind of way of thinking about it, because I think they are the essence of what humans are. And so even the history and what has happened to us matters little in comparison to that. But we do need to know the rest, because unfortunately we are not alone. We are not on this little earth just sitting here blissfully creating our reality, all connected and everything is great. No, you see, this is it. We are part of a chess game, you could say. Yeah. And we are the pawns. So that's not, you know, that would have been like a Garden of Eden scenario before there was some sort of intervention, or that's right, you know what I'm saying? Yeah. So what I'm saying is that, yeah, if we were not so much, if there was no you know, it sounds bad, but if there was no education of the child, they would probably be a lot more open to all these possibilities. And you know, sure, they might not be able to, you know, they might not be able to read and write and add up a lot of things in that, but what I'm saying is that that's a minute downside and may not even matter that much if they became aware and developed the fact. I shouldn't say fact, I'm not supposed to say fact, because people don't like you to say fact unless you can prove it. So I should say I think, but I'm sorry if, you know, because I suppose what is true for me, it's like I say about this belief system, that we all have beliefs and then we think the beliefs are truth. So, you know, so it's the same with me. So, you know, if you don't agree, that's okay. And I wouldn't expect that you would agree. There would be not many people that probably would, because you do have to know these things for yourself. You do have to prove them to yourself. I can prove some things for myself, but I can't prove it to you on a video. You know, because if you experience something yourself and you check it out, that validates it for you, but it doesn't validate it for someone else. You know, so this is the problem. But at any rate, yeah, if the child is not, you know, got so much programming in, so much information. It's a bit like if you go on the computer, if you're getting a lot of information, but most of it is only a certain type of information, you're not getting alternative information, you're not getting any other away from what fits the information you already have. Um, then if that turned out to be false or not the true reality, then you're stuck with it, and you won't even low the truth will be shown to you, because it has to be. I think as spiritual beings we have to be shown by the master, by the God, have to be shown the truth. Okay, it's almost like a law. I'm not going to go into why that would be, but it's like a rule. It's like they can't make a move unless you accept the move. You have, because we're spiritual beings and we still have free choice, even though we are now so far away from that, and so far away from what we are, and so not, and so much under the control of the whole uh, game board, shall we say. You know, that we can't access or be free enough to spot the truth, even though it's put right in front of us. So if I turn my TV on and something is presented to me that tells me the absolute truth about what is the real reality, I'm not going to be able to recognize it. My advice, and this is what I'm doing now, is if I see something and I think looks too fantastic and does not look believable, I'm going to say this is a duality world, everything is in reverse. That is probably more true than what I saw that I thought was true on, say, a bulletin or something else. I'm saying that. I'm saying there is more truth in the fantasy realm, and that's why I think children are too indoctrinated with too much knowledge when they're children, instead of being allowed to be free and be children and use their imagination, because that's when they create, you see. Because human beings are spiritual beings in a physical body, their thought creates reality and they're all connected. Children should be sitting around or playing, using their imagination, not worrying about facts and figures and histories that may or may not be true, and all the different subjects that they're taught and all the different things. This is all designed so that you can play in this fake technological world that we live in. Not designed so that you can become a spiritual being that creates reality with your thinking and is connected to other spiritual beings creating reality with their thinking, so that we can all create whatever world we need or want, etc., if you follow me. Because that ability is not being developed, it's not being allowed to flow naturally. Instead, the intellect takes over the creative mind, shall we say. But basically, see, the intellect is okay. There's nothing wrong. Humans have intellect, they're highly intelligent. But even that is suppressed by too much information, if it's not correct information particularly, and it limits the actual thinking, original thinking, okay, original thinking. It's like technology and the technological God can create, but he needs the thought from the human first in order to then create. The human needs nothing in order to create, but the human creates the thought and then it is controlled and directed by the entity God. But what I'm trying to say is the human, and this is why, technology for me is not as superior as the human. Not because technology can't advance much further than what humans when you really look at it, but that is only because they are using the original human thought. Without the original human thought or thoughts, the technology is at a standstill. It can't think or produce anything itself. It can only manipulate what is already given to it. And the human gives it the creative thought, the spark. Without that spark, technology will only go so far on its own. Technology can never reach high heights. Some people will not realize this, and this is why they have, even in the past, I think, bowed down to the technological gods. Because, of course, if a god has been around for a lot longer than a human and knows much more, and then the human doesn't even develop or know itself or what it really is and what it's supposed to be doing and that it's creating, the technological God is going to advance to as high as what the technology can go, and that can be quite high at that level. But because it still takes and only develops because of the human original thought and the human spark, shall we say, it wouldn't have developed nothing without the human, or at least it wouldn't have, it wouldn't, it would still reach a point and then it would stop. Whereas the human, and this hasn't happened, but it should have happened, the human can go as far as what its imagination and its creative thinking can take it. It's a bit hard to explain. I don't know if I'm getting it very well. But it's a bit like, how should I say? It's a bit like, this is how I see the difference between, say, a human and a kind of robot or what they call artificial intelligence, all this sort of stuff. It's like the more the human gives, the human is giving the artificial intelligence or the robot the information, the creative stuff in particular. And then it expands on it. It expands on it type of thing. But the human is not being given any information. And that's why the human is not expanding, but the technology does. It's a bit hard to explain. But the human is really the creator. So they're being put, we are being put, humans are being put in a, they're bowing down to the technology because it advances while we're giving it that means to advance, but we're not giving ourselves the means to advance. We're giving technology the spark, the ability to expand and progress, and we're limiting ourselves because we are in the dark. We are not, we're not aware of what we are and what we are doing. We're giving it over to the technology. But if you look at it in a kind of logical, intellectual way, even though, as I say, we're spiritual and we create. But creating is still a physical thing. We create the physical reality with our thinking and our feeling. So this should be really enough in a funny kind of way, if you think about it, because what else is there? A computer or a technological thing can create, but only after we give it the original thoughts. If a computer or artificial intelligence did not get any input from us, it would be a lifeless, useless nothing almost. It would not have any means of expanding itself at all. And even at the expanding level, it will only expand as much as what we give it. But we are giving it our full input. Instead of us keeping our input to ourselves, because we're spiritual beings and we're all connected, we are not connected. We are giving that to the AI so that they expand and we stay down. But they would be nothing without us. So it's kind of, I don't know, is the word ironic or whatever? It's kind of, it's not correct at all. And it is another deception of this world and another illusion of this world. Because we're not seeing ourselves as we really are. Because if we create everything with our thinking, you have to think about that. We really shouldn't need anything else at all, should we? Like, to me, that seems almost common sense, but, correct me if I'm wrong. That seems like logical. That seems intellectual. That makes sense intellectually, even. In fact, intellect, is just something that would be not actually, doesn't actually come into it that much. It's more of a creative, it's like a creative, it's just the ability to create. And intellect really doesn't come into it. It is just thought. I mean, if you were aware of it, and, some might be more, I actually think that the more spiritually advanced someone is, that actually increases all these things. The intellect and the ability to create and all the different abilities that humans should have. That's what I actually think. But instead, we are giving it over to technology in a way, so that means that we will not develop any of our abilities. We will give the abilities to the technology. My view is that even though we are giving everything over to the technology could never and will never advance to the level that we should be. It can never happen. Technology can go very far, and technology impresses human beings because they've limited themselves so much, and that's not their fault. This is because, as I've said before, because we have all been programmed, and we do not know the world that we live in. We don't know that it is like this chess game. We think we're the only players, and that a few other human beings are the only players, and this is not the case. Even the other human beings that are playing, we are not all the same. I always used to think human beings were all the same. All seem to want the same. No, we are not all the same. That's not a bad thing. But you do have to be aware of it, and you have to know what you are and where you fit in. Most of us don't fit in because the world is chaotic and we do not have any control over it. And we do not know all the different directions that we are pushed by the force that controls this world. And it is a powerful force, and it operates on advanced technology. And like I say, the everything that you see that you think is false, my advice would be watch as many movies as you can. And the more far out, these were things I avoided. Watch them. You will see more truth there. It will be shown to you because it has to be shown, I believe. But if you're shown something and you think it's fantasy, then it's useless you watching it. You see what I'm saying? And this is the trick, because this is the deception and the illusion of the world, because most of what we do see everything. We are presented with a lot of information. We believe the stuff that we believe and are told is fact. But all the other stuff that we are shown, we believe to be fantasy, not of this real world. The same as the past gods, the same as the past history, the same as a lot of the Bible stuff even. We don't take it to be totally historically correct. But more importantly, even if we believe that it is historically correct, we don't believe it's possible now, you see. But in a funny kind of way, that's if you think any of this is funny, which, I'm trying to, but I really don't see it as funny, because don't forget, the more you know, the more you will have the world, this kind of stuff coming down on you to close that off too. Because this is not the way that the entity particularly wants people to operate. There will be a choice, and you will be shown the truth. That's if you care to look a little bit, or even if you care to open your eyes to what you would, like I say, perceive as false. But, the idea is for you not to accept the true reality. The God entity, the way this world operates is to keep you in the rat race, yes, to keep you playing the game, not to play your own game, not to create on your own. And when I say on your own, you're not really creating ever on your own anyway, because as I've said before, we're spiritual beings in a physical body. Our thought creates reality, but we are all connected. So even though you might, like myself, have lived very much on my own, the fact that I think I'm on my own is only because I have been denied the knowledge that I'm really connected to other human beings. I don't think that every time I'm making a move or doing something that it's having any effect on anyone or anything else. But if this is the truth, of course, it has to be that we are all like hitting against one another all the time, even if you're not even seeing people. You see what I'm saying? And they're doing that to you too. So that's why we feel bad, get sick, have a lot of negative things happen, all that sort of stuff. And that's just in amongst ourselves. That's without the entity God actually directly affecting us, because don't forget, it's his game board. So we kind of do that to ourselves and to other people, indirectly and directly, and then we're also being completely influenced by this game board that we're in, by the fact that we are the pawns in it. So it's very complicated and very difficult to straighten things out in this sense and to get the world on a more even keel, shall we say. And this is not, and it may not, it's probably not to the liking of necessarily the forces that control things that would even be wanted, you see. So it might be what I might want or what someone else might want, but we're only individuals and we're not controlling this thing, and we're not even controlling even our own little domain because we don't know what we are and that we are creating and that we are meant to be, human beings are meant to be at least controlling their own domain a little bit. And instead we also give our information over to technology, we give our world over to technology. This is a separate thing. This is part of the rat race, the setup, the system that the game board that is the world, that is controlled by other entity, and in duality, dark and light, right and wrong, good and bad, and always pushing towards the negative, because without pushing towards the negative, the human is not forced into a choice. And the idea is to keep you to make the negative choice. That's how the game is to push the spiritual human being into that. And that's why we've all failed all our lives, because we've always went for the negative choice, and we've, even when we've thought it was the right choice, it's always turned out to be the wrong choice in hindsight, as they say. And that also is because if you don't think that it's all about spiritual, therefore about what I suppose could be termed making a kind of spiritually right choice, most of the time we tend to make a practical right choice, you know what I'm saying? Rather than a spiritually right choice. And unfortunately, from what I'm now finding out, it's the spiritual right choice that will really give you the most benefits in the long run. The practical choice will give you the benefits in the immediate, but like I say, everything is like just one big continuum of what I can see anyway. So it's probably not wise to make the practical, even intellectual choice in the moment, because that moment won't last very long, and it will turn out as time goes, and also things will get harder. I know that's been the case in my life. You think that if you make the easy, practical, intellectual choice, that it will serve you better down the track, but in the long run, it just compounds to where this world then becomes a real hell, and it really does. So that's just a word of advice. And I'm giving that from first hand, that if you don't make the spiritual choice, and then if you don't believe that we are spiritual beings, you're not going to make the spiritual choice, are you? So it is very much a catch-22. And but like I say, the human being, is now very limited, but they were not meant to be limited. It's the technology that really is limited, but we see it the other way around. Everything in reverse. As I've said, it's a duality world and everything is reversed. So what we perceive to be right is often should be the opposite. It's a real trick, confusing situation, to say the least. And I'm not sure how everyone's going to get out of it. I can't get out of it myself, even knowing stuff. It's just, it has to be a bit of a joint knowledge. And also you do have to know what I will say is, and I'll say it because I said it before, watch a lot of movies. Watch the more far out ones. Watch the older ones, watch the new ones. TV too, the same way, because there's a lot on TV as well. I don't watch most of it, but I've seen enough to see that it is all showing you the real world. The real world. What is really in your world. You won't believe it. And even if you look around, you might be even looking directly at what you're seeing on there. Sometimes you actually will. Most of the time you won't, because most things are behind the scenes. Most are not shown. But sometimes even when you're looking actually right at the real world, you could be looking at what is on that, but you won't recognize it. You won't relate to it. You just won't. But if you open, but that's why I say if we were more, not so much programmed to what we perceive to be possible, shall we say, because there again, if you don't think that certain things are possible, or like even if you think that we're not scientifically enough advanced for some of the things that you see, then you're not going to think it's possible in your reality. Whereas if you say, oh yeah, well, that was discovered by science and that is scientifically right, so therefore you will then perhaps open your mind to it. But you must remember that we don't know everything. We don't know all the science. We don't know all the real technology that goes on. We only know what we have. And because we are not creating anything ourselves directly, because we don't know that we're spiritual beings and that we are creating reality probably by a proxy, I would think, almost, and that we're all connected, but we think the only way we connect is a telephone, a mobile, or a internet, or whatever. You see, that this is it. So we're really living in a we're the ones that are living in the fantasy world because we don't know anything. That's why I say look to what you think is fantasy and say that is more likely to be real or a possibility real, and say maybe a lot of what is around me is, yeah, just what I'm programmed with. That's how I see it now anyway. And I'm not saying I think it's good, but that is what I do think. And but either way, like I say, just have a good look and say to you and try that. And you might even try, even at a personal level, saying, oh, I think I might just do the opposite to what I would normally do, and you might find that it might work better for you, because if it is a duality world and everything is in reverse, and I'll tell you that this is how some of the top people operate anyway. They know these things, and that is actually their philosophy. And the reason a lot of these, they're not necessarily as spiritual as what humans should be, but even knowledge is still a power. That's what I'm saying. Even a technological being, if he has more power, more knowledge, and has much more at his disposal, he's going to overtake the human, because the human is in the dark. It's not because the human is not as intelligent. Far from it. It's just that the human is not aware of what they are and what their abilities are. Whereas the other beings have got the full knowledge, and they understand the human more than the human understands itself, because the human has been programmed to be kept in a limited way, because that way we stay in this game board and we keep playing the game, because we wouldn't want to play the game if we realised that we can't win and that we're just playing a game that can go nowhere, because the game maker, the game master, the game controller knows every bit of the game board, and controls the game board and manipulates the game board and has more knowledge and has been around a lot longer than you and knows that you are the creative force, but you do not have any control over that. You're not operating the way you were, say, originally meant to operate, I would say. So, so you're at a disadvantage. And whereas the master God entity control, or whatever you want to say, has the absolute upper hand and has everything that you should have, and uses that to create the reality they want, not the reality you want. Even though you are the original creator. It's like sometimes if you oh it's like if you give someone a little bit of information, private information that could have benefited yourself, and you give it to someone else or you share it with someone else. That person might then go and create something wonderful and they get all the credit. And it's not that they haven't done something, but without your original spark and your original little idea, they would have had nothing. But you gave it away. It's kind of like that, in a way, I think. Okay, I'm tired now, so I better finish off, and I hope I made a wee bit of sense, at least little bits of it, because I know as a whole it probably doesn't make any sense at all, unfortunately, and I'm just not very good at doing that. I wish I could get the whole idea across a little bit better. But maybe if you just investigate yourself, like I say, we're all the same, you should be able to piece it together and get a little bit yourself, and maybe you'll do better than me. Okay?